You are the salt of the earth. Now that might strike you as a strange thing to be called. If someone online, or a stranger, or even your friend was talking to you and suddenly started calling you salty, you'd probably be questioning what you did to deserve it. I mean, you didn't do anything salty. Like, why are they calling you salty? Like, they're the ones who are being salty. Who do they think that they are? Really? Because obviously they're the salty one, not you. Being salty has taken on some new meaning in the last few years, but I want to talk to you about a very old meaning and highlight two reasons why it is such a powerful thing to be called the salt of the earth. Jesus uses these words in Matthew 5:13 when speaking to a crowd that is gathered from all throughout the area. During his sermon he says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." Before we go any further, the question has to be answered: what does it mean to be salty? In this case, it does not mean raging at your teammate because they can't seem to figure out the objective of the game. Like, just hop on the point, man. Why are you having trouble with this? It's obvious. It marks out where you're supposed to go, and like, you're 0 and 28. Like, seriously, man. Like, just it's easy. Just various reasons that I will not go into. Jesus was not talking about that. Instead, he was using figurative language to paint a picture about the people who follow him. You think about salt, you probably quickly jump to thinking about flavor. Salt is something that can make your food taste good. It can take bland food and make it something completely different. Jesus is thinking about it in the same way. Immediately before this verse, Jesus lists blessings for people who embody certain traits. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," and so forth. These are the people Jesus is calling salty, not just anyone in the crowd, but people who hold these traits. In Mark 9:50, a very similar verse, Jesus says, "Salt is good, but if the salt becomes unsalty, with what will you make it salty again? Have salt in yourselves, and be at peace with one another." This indicates that God wants us to have salt and shows us that being salty is a choice. We are salty when we live the way God wants us to. When our lives embody traits like those listed in the beginning of Matthew 5, we are the salt of the earth. And this is the first takeaway I want us to have. When we do the things God wants us to do, we are salty. Not only that, but God says that we can do it and even shows us how to. This gives us a framework to compare ourselves with to determine if we're on the right track. We can look at the verses earlier in the chapter and all throughout the Bible and know how we ought to live, know what God wants us to be. There are signs all over telling us where to go. We just have to look for them and follow them. And this should be a massive encouragement to you. I know it is for me. So that's point number one. We can and should strive to be the salt of the earth. To be the perfectly salted fries, not the bland, stale ones that you accidentally left out all night. Don't eat those. Which brings us to the second piece of the puzzle, which is something that can't be ignored. If you look at both of these passages again, you see that they both share something in common. They both clearly state the possibility of failure, which means that it is possible to be those stale fries on the counter, or to be the guy who isn't playing the objective of life. From Matthew, "But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." And from Mark, "But if the salt becomes unsalty, with what will you make it salty again?" It is possible for us to lose our flavor and become ineffectual as Christians and as people. Just as we can find the right track, we can also fall off and be on the wrong one. If you think about this, it might scare you a little bit. Maybe it makes you think that you haven't really been living for Christ the way you should be. Maybe there are entire areas of your life where you haven't been giving God the time of day and where what you do is decided by what you want to do. Maybe you haven't really been focused on growing spiritually or otherwise for a long time. Maybe you never have focused. It might make you wonder, if another person looked at my life, would they be able to tell I was a Christian at all? These are all thoughts I started having as I read this and other verses over the past few months, and they scare me because I can't confidently say that I am living the way I need to be living. The truth is, there are areas of my life that I am living almost entirely for myself and God is absent. When I look at myself, I don't always see a Christian. It scares me, and I know there are a lot of other people in the exact same position. If we focused on these thoughts alone and didn't move on, we could be in a pretty dark place. But it's important to remember that we don't have to be this way. We can be salt. We can live the way God wants us to. We have hope. God has given us grace, and what's more, He has extended His hand toward us and shown us the way. He has given us a love by which we can overcome fear. So yeah, it's scary, but it doesn't have to stay scary. Jesus showed us the way to live the lives He wants us to live. We've all failed. We're probably going to fail again. But we can succeed. If we can become tasteless, we can also acquire taste. So that's why I'm sitting here recording this today. I want us to live our lives more fully for God. I don't want to settle for good enough anymore, because good enough isn't really good enough. And so I'm doing something about it, and I want to motivate you to do the same. If I can't confidently say that I'm doing things right, then I want to change something about it until I can. I encourage you to take a moment to read the rest of Matthew 5 and think about the areas of your life that could use some spiritual attention. The first step to solving problems is to take a moment and identify them. And that won't be an instant process because big, important things take time. The second step is to pray. And you can do that before step 1 actually, and after, and in between. Just pray. I pray that through this channel we can grow together, become the saltiest people we can possibly be. The people God wants us to be and that so many others need us to be. With this video, I extend a challenge toward you and myself to be what Jesus challenged that crowd to be 2,000 years ago. I challenge you to become the salt of the earth. Thanks for watching, and may God be with your endeavors both today and in the days to come. Amen.